फर्स्ट सप्लीमेंट्री पर मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा माननीय सदस्यों से, क्वेश्चन आवर का अपना महत्व है, वो शुरू होता है तो उस पर फिर बात चर्चा होती है, प्लीज.
Sir, the iron and steel sector is considered as the core of our economy and is projected to grow 5 times in the next 2 decades. So the steel sector is extremely energy and resource intensive and its present form highly polluting. So today the production of 1 ton of steel means emission of 3 tons of carbon dioxide, and globally this is 1.4 only. So I wish to know from the Honourable Minister, through you sir, whether the government has taken any steps to audit the different factors responsible for the present situation of excessive emissions and whether there is any R&D in that behalf.
Thank you, Vandana ji. Mani Mantri ji.
Sir, this is a very important question raised by the Honourable Member, and I would like to request you and the indulgence of the House in terms of enunciating our plan to address this issue. Certainly the steel sector is known as a hard-to-abate sector. However, we are not very far in terms of global averages, in terms of our emission numbers, as opposed to what the Honourable Member said. Our current average emission intensity is about 2.55 tons per CO2 per ton of crude steel, compared to about 1.95, which is the average in the world. However, we still have a way to go. And therefore, we have put in place a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan. The short-term plan really looks at reduction of carbon emissions through energy and resource efficiency, renewable energy. The medium-term plan, which is 2030 to 2047, looks at CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization and storage, as well as a usage of possibly green hydrogen, depending on technology innovations. And the long-term plan from 2047 to 2070 looks at a complete move over from ore-based and coal-based to much more technological innovations to come down to net zero as far as the world is concerned. I'd like to just inform the Honourable Member as well. If you look at this industry, you have to have in place supply-side drivers as well as demand-side drivers to bring down the level of emissions. As far as supply-side drivers are concerned, we've looked at energy efficiency and we've actually achieved a lot. From 2005 to 2022, we have brought down emissions by almost 15%, and our target is to cut it by another 10% by 2030. Because of the steps in this sector, the specific energy consumption has come down from 7 to 6.3 gigacalories per ton of crude steel produced. And the emission intensity also has come down from 3 to 2.55 in terms of the tons of CO2 compared to the total crude steel that is produced. We are also looking at renewable energy as a source, where we've looked at the National Solar Mission, where we hope to cut emissions by 20% by 2030. Resource efficiency is another area. Here we intend to use pellets, we intend to use scrap, we intend to use plastic as a raw material. All these 3 areas can bring about lowering of emissions. In fact, scrap can lower emissions by almost 85%. So that's another area that we are looking at tremendously. Today, India consumes 26 million tons of scrap. We import 4 million tons, so total 30 million tons of scrap are being used in India today to manufacture steel as we speak, which is roughly about 22.5% of our production. We're also looking at the possibility of green hydrogen when it becomes economically efficient to do so. Today, the prices are way above, as well as carbon capture and storage. On the demand side as well, sir, we are looking at 2 aspects. One is possibly government mandation of usage of green steel, because almost about 20% of our steel is used in government projects, and whether we can look at government mandation for a small amount of steel production. If we look at roughly 20% of a mandatory limit, I'm giving you an example, at a 30% price premium for green steel, the cost of projects will increase only by 1.26%. So this is an avenue that we're looking at. And finally, raising private demand, raising our awareness as a population, looking at branding green steel inside, eco-labeling, as well as looking at mandating the private sector and ESG rating benefits.
Thank you. Thank you. Second supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Minister has very articulately put down what exactly the government is doing in that direction, and it's certainly very, very welcome. Sir, I would like to know whether the government also considers to have certain green guidelines for every plant in this behalf. Carbon capture, you have already mentioned, but specific use of plastic waste to reduce the coal requirement, using solid waste, which is generated as waste at the plants in roads and railway lines, like it's done in many foreign countries, recycling of water and the like, for an environmentally sustainable way of production that can be differentiated, sir, from other coals so that the government and public sector can use it with a specific mandate till it comes into 100% the supply chain.
Thank you,
or
Vandana.
demand chain.
Thank you.
So again, a very good suggestion for action by the honorable member. And let me say this, that it's not easy to mandate a universal formula, if you will, in terms of what is the input material that every plant you should use, because every plant has its own makeup. So for example, you have some plants based on electric arc furnace, you have other plants that are based on blast furnace or BOF, some that use DRI process with pulverized coal injection. So every plant has its own system, but certainly as a category, we are looking at raw materials in terms of resource efficiency, and let me just give you a few examples. For example, if we look at the area of pellets and we use 100% pellets, you can almost reduce your CO2 emissions by 10 to 15%. That's example number one. Number two, if you look at scrap, as I mentioned, you can lower CO2 emissions by 85%. And as I mentioned to you, we are using 30 million tons of scrap today in India as we speak. We're one of the countries that are on the forefront of using so much scrap compared to the rest of the world. The third area is plastic, but that can be used as a mixture in terms of the process as opposed to the input. And the fourth, which is very important, is beneficiation of iron ore. If you beneficiate iron ore, if you have a 1% increase in Fe content, you can lower the coke requirement by almost about 1%. And if you lower coke requirement, then you lower CO2 emission as well.
Thank